how does exercise and food affect ketone and glucose readings?
So it's two questions, really. So
Yes.
let's start with exercise. And I touched on this already. Exercise, if you are a ketone burner, if you're in ketosis, is going to mobilize fat oxidation, right? That's kind of the point. We
Yes.
want to use fat for fuel.
Yeah.
So fat is stored as triglycerides, which is 3 fatty acids bonded together by a glycerol backbone. So in order to break that down into something that your cells can use, and your cells can use fatty acids for fuel, is that to break that into the 3 fatty acids, and that glycerol backbone comes off, and then the liver can take that glycerol backbone and turn it into glucose. So
That's awesome. Yeah.
when you're working out and you come home and you take a blood sugar reading immediately after a workout, I would expect and I would hope to see a higher blood glucose reading because I've been burning fat, and it's giving my liver a substrate, so to speak, to build new glucose, and that's not bad. That's just the way it is. I would expect, as someone who's very insulin sensitive, for that number to drop back off very quickly, but it should be high immediately after working out. Now,
And before you go, are you going into food?
I was going to talk about ketones.
Oh, okay.
So ketones, I don't really measure that after working out, but I would expect that number to be lower as it's a fuel source that I'm consuming and not necessarily back building like I am the glucose from the glycerol backbone.
So I just wanted to say, seeing the glucose numbers rise after you exercise might be something you want to test for so you can see it happening. One thing it will demonstrate to you, and kind of proof of concept, is that your body can make its own glucose without you eating any external glucose. We talked about this. There's a video, do I have to eat more carbs in order to gain more muscle? There's a video here on this channel you can go back and watch where we talked about this. And it's just, carbohydrates are the only food group you don't have to eat to ingest exogenously for your body to make the same component. It can make its own blood sugar, right? That's just glucose. So I really like testing after exercise for that proof of concept, because you'll see the sugar go up and you'll go, oh, well, I'm in ketosis. I'm not ingesting carbohydrates, so my body is manufacturing its own glucose. So what about food?
Absolutely.
So what about food?
Well, for food, it's a lot different, right? Mm-hmm. Because it depends on what food you're eating.
And how sensitive you are.
Right. So if you're eating something with coconut oil in it, you might expect to see a lot of ketones. You might expect to see a raise in ketones. Right,
because the MCT in coconut, any coconut product really, more in coconut oil than other coconut products, is your body can very easily convert that directly to a ketone body. So you might see higher levels if you use MCT oil. That's why a lot of people buy MCT oil separately. They might use it to cook with salad dressings just because it converts faster than other healthy fats.
Yeah. And then you should see an insulin response. So you should see a blood glucose raise, like a slow raise with most foods that you eat.
But it's not going to be like you drank a Coke.
Right. It's not going to be this super high, sharp hockey stick-like spike, right? You don't want to see that like driving up like 20 minutes, 30 minutes after you eat. If you're seeing driving up and you're passing 140, 150, 160, then you've got a problem, right? Then you're consuming too many carbs. Or the food that you're eating is, not necessarily keto friendly if it's marked that way.
Yes, that can be a problem too. Just because it says keto on the label, there's no FDA control over that. That's a marketing term.
Right.
So whenever I see keto on a label, it's an instant red flag for me to do some of my own investigations. And a lot of times you'll see things like rice flour in a product, which is very clearly not a ketogenic ingredient.
Right.
It's not going to convert to ketones. It's going to convert to glucose.
Right.
Because it's a grain.
Yeah, and you could look at those spikes and those valleys after you eat something that contains carbohydrates and kind of get a sense for what your insulin is doing, right? If it spikes and then it comes back down really quickly, you would assume that your insulin is doing its job, right? It's getting in there, it's clearing glucose out of your blood, it's getting it, into its cells. But if it stays high for a really long time and takes a long time to drop off, then you would expect like, okay, maybe my insulin's not as effective as it should be. But that's a way different, insulin measurement is a way harder thing to measure than glucose.
Yeah.
So it's easy to measure glucose, so that's the thing that people measure.